Hey guys, Matt here. This is a bit of a departure for me while I work on other stuff. I thought I would do a quick response video. Somebody asked a couple of thoughtful questions in the comment section for my collaborative effort with Jen Sarai, Darth Zana versus Shakti, and it was a thoughtful enough question that I was in the middle of drafting a rather lengthy response. And I thought, no, this really is, this question has enough substance to it that I could make a short video about it, so that's what I'm going to do. Alright. Marxist Jediist, I'm assuming that's how this is said, asks, I have a couple of questions about the Sith, and this just seemed like a good place to ask experts. I understand that, unlike the Jedi, they, meaning the Sith, look inward and use their passion to fuel their strength. Yet, paradoxically, many of them seem to realize that their emotions, through the dark side, can actually manipulate them by making them reckless. How do they reconcile an understanding that being rational means keeping your emotions in check with the idea that the rational thing to do is draw all your power from unchecked emotions? Second, is that all the dark side really is? Power from anger. Could more Sith theoretically be like Kaitis, or even though this is a stretch, Traya, when they sought to destroy the Force, and see the dark side as a necessary tool for the good of everyone, or is he doomed to be an exception? Thanks to anyone who answers. Okay, first off, let me say that this is my interpretation. And I've discussed it with another of my very good friends, and so I'm going to be including a number of their thoughts. For now, let me start with this. These are not simple questions to answer, but I'll try to give my take on it here. As to the first question of how a Sith Lord reconciles recklessness, rationality, and the pursuit of power, in my view, the truth is that most don't, on a fundamental level. In a sense, they too actually spend much of their time and effort training to control their emotions. It's just different from how the Jedi do it, with necessarily different goals in most instances, rather. So that's kind of that speaks to the element of functionality, or how a Sith Lord manages to use their powers in an effectual way. Because as the questioner phrased it, it seems counterintuitive to hold yourself in check while using your powers when the only way to gain greater power is to give in to those emotions. And it's sort of done on a case-by-case basis. It's like if one attempts to talk about the lightsaber forms when you talk about Ataru, the most elaborate and or not the most elaborate necessarily, but the most physically demanding of all of the lightsaber forms. It's supposed to be used in calculated bursts of activity, and otherwise you wear yourself out with it. It's the same process with the dark side. You use your abilities to their apex in very short, concentrated bursts. Otherwise, you're doomed, because you will, overwhelmingly so, it seems that gets users into a great deal of trouble. In most cases, actually. There are a few exceptions to that, of course. But my friend goes on to say that reconciling and understanding that being rational means keeping one's emotions in check, with the idea that the rational thing to do is draw all your power from unchecked emotions, is the Sith's equivalent to the Jedi's similarly paradoxical quandary. The only major differences, which make all the difference in the world, of course, is that for the Sith, it centers primarily around anger and hate, whereas for the Jedi, that emotion is love. Sith need the fiery emotions like hatred to fuel their power, in most cases, whereas Jedi need, or at least draw their greater strength from the less volatile but no less powerful emotion of love, in some form or another, in their mission to protect others and pursue justice. Of course, love can be every bit as passionate as hatred, and therefore easily lead to it, and it isn't necessarily selfless either. So that it has its benefits for Sith, just like a certain degree of hatred or anger towards injustice conserved Jedi. The second difference is the respective goals of the Jedi and Sith. And here's where I'm going to get into this. This goes back to the fundamental level of that issue that the Sith have to grapple with. How do they reconcile recklessness, rationality, and the pursuit of power, and my contention that in truth they don't really achieve this. While the Jedi may view the Force as an end in and of itself, the Sith see it as a means to an end, and they believe that that end is power. This is the contention of beings like Darth Sidious, Darth Bane, two highly venerated Sith Lords, of course. However, this is an inherent contradiction, in my opinion. What is the definition of power? The meaning of the word itself. Don't even think about it in context of the Force. Just think about power, the word. All power really means is the ability to do something. Thus, the Sith crave and pursue power for power's sake. Even the most level-headed among their number, such as Darth Bane, admit this. This is why their existence tends to bring only corruption and misery. Think of the old, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Very few can put power without a purpose to any good use at all. And this is the reason why you don't see much deviation there. This is why a being like Kaitis is such an exception. Sith can't seem to do much more than elevate their own station or fortify their position. Take a Sith Lord like Palpatine, for example, or at the time Chancellor Palpatine. A man who essentially already controlled the galaxy even before his institution of the Empire. As respected as he is amongst the fan base, and as feared an enemy as he was due to his strength in the Force and level of success from an in-universe perspective amongst the community of the galaxy, all he really did was place himself on a throne. Grandiose self-deification is the highest aspiration of most Sith, whether they realize that or not. And that's why I feel Sith doctrine only allows potential for a hollow existence, even amongst the best of their number. Sith draw power from their emotions, of course, their embrace of rage, anger, hatred, passion, jealousy, etc. These things better enable them to augment their ability. They are reliant on these emotions to expand their range of ability and their degree of agency, because remember, as addictive and alluring as the Sith find power, the dark side of the Force itself endeavors to seduce and ensnare those same individuals for itself. The dark side is an aspect of the Force, and the Force has a will of its own, though its level of sentience is at best vaguely defined. In fact, various figures view or interpret the Force's nature differently, but we'll not get into that. That's a whole other topic of discussion. The point is, just as the Sith Lord calls on the power of the Force, the dark side claims the Sith Lord for its own. And that's really the key point here. And if you want the best representation of this idea, I would think it's the Darth Plagueis novel, written by James Luceno. That book really gets into the nature of the dark side as the Sith Lord, as the Dark Lords of the Sith view it. It gets into the relationship not between the Force and a Jedi who calls on the power of darkness in a given instant, or a simple dark Jedi, or a being without any actual structured sort of formal training in either aspect of the Force, but the nature of the relationship between Sith Master and the dark side of the Force itself. Again, a very key point. Just as the Sith Lord calls on the power of the Force, the dark side claims the Sith Lord for its own. Your will is no longer solely your own. Do you understand? That's what that essentially means. You become warped when you join your destiny with the power of darkness. So therein, that's where my point about how on a fundamental level it is an uphill battle that they will never actually surmount. This attempt to reconcile recklessness, rationality, and the pursuit of power. It simply can't be done. Not according to Sith doctrine. It's not going to go away. It's a problem that they can't actually eliminate or eradicate. And Sith Lords, like Darth Plagueis, for example, a member of the Mune species and culture, and therefore gifted with a keen mind for economics and finance, came to view the nature of this relationship as something akin to a contractual agreement or obligation. In joining his or her destiny with the power of darkness, the Sith Lord also pledges to remain within the dark side's thrall forever. By this logic, should a Sith Lord who has entered into agreement with the dark side, so to speak, stray from that path or change the nature of the agreement in some other way, i.e. subvert the Force itself by attempting to create life, then imminent disaster would be sure to follow. They do not treat the Force deferentially, but attempt to break it, mold it into a beast of burden, to be used as an instrument of an individual's will. However the Force self-regulates, it strikes back. The Force strikes back. It takes steps to bring itself back into balance, and the Sith are capable of recognizing this shift, though often only see it after it's too late. For example, Plagueis suspected what Anakin Skywalker was, a backlash through which the Force sought to end the Sith for Plagueis and Palpatine's acts against nature, their attempts to create life. Though he could do little to hinder the boy's progress, even though he was aware of him. And again, this is where we have to kind of take into account the differences between Jedi and Sith and their respective goals or aspirations. What are they actually trying to do? When you answer that question, it's quite clear that the Jedi and Sith, for all of their stark differences, carry several similarities. And Palpatine himself noted that the Jedi and the Sith are similar in almost every way. But it's much easier to understand the Sith when you keep in mind that they are simply the mirror image of the Jedi, the same yet completely reversed, or inverse. We have to question not whether or not the dark side could be used to bring about greater good, because figures like Revan have tried, figures like Kaitis have tried. We've seen that it's been attempted to be used in this way or in this manner. But we have to question whether or not the Sith Lord, or a given Sith Lord, would want to, because there is a very distinct difference between the power of darkness, or the dark side of the Force itself, and the Sith Order, and the Sith Code, and Sith Doctrine, and Sith ideals. There's a distinction to be made there. When you think about it, a Sith Lord like Kaitis, while not entirely unique in many respects, but not in this one. He's definitely an exception to the general rule, especially if you look at it in terms of his initial motivations and realizations concerning the time of his fall, his being a member of the Skywalker lineage and everything. A very unique role to play, a very unique situation to find oneself in when ranked next to all the other Sith. But in terms of trying to use the dark side to bring about the greater good, as you put it in the question, not entirely unique in that respect, but again, it's not that the dark side can't be used for that reason or with that purpose in mind, as even Jedi have done so. It's just that you're not going to find Sith who would want to. There are other Sith who have broken with tradition in an attempt to use the dark side to promote their own political ideology, rather than gain greater power, so to speak. Even after becoming Darth Tyrannus, Count Dooku, for example, did in fact remain the political idealist that his old friends had described him as in the Chancellor's office. He just, as it turned out, had a very, very different vision for the future of the galaxy than they ever did. Again, as noted in the question, Traya also represented a departure, but on an entirely different level. She was actually something. She was another case entirely. Traya wished to end the Force and merely used the dark side, and accordingly methodology that is more in line with Sith tradition, as well as simple manipulation and deception without taking her strength in the Force into account at all in order to accomplish her goal. She's much more a product of insanity and an inability to cope with an uncomfortable reality, an inconvenient truth, so to speak, than an adherence to Sith tenets or the dark side. So she's not a perfect example, but yes, she is somebody who attempted to use the dark side for an alternate purpose, though I would contend it was not for the greater good, because as wise as Kreia was, she was also wildly mistaken and wrong, I think, in her view of the galaxy. So then, of course, there's the second part of the question. Is that all the dark side really is? Power from anger. Does that mean the whole "I'm stronger in the Force, so everyone should be my slave" is just a product of the Sith? Questionable. I would say it's more a product of human nature, or in the case of Star Wars, sentient nature, than actual Sith doctrine. Though Sith doctrine feeds that perspective, or it supports that point of view. But no, that's not all the dark side is. Power from anger, or vice versa. The individual does not create the dark side. The individual does not manifest it or use it simply to force others to bow down to them. The dark side is a salient aspect of the Force itself, which the individual can bond to, become the agent of, augment a connection to through acceptance and expression of strong emotions, and even at the risk of great peril attempt to bend, break, or shape for their own purposes. It is complex. But the addictive and corrupting nature of the dark side itself is what prevents most Sith Lords from even thinking of using it as an instrument through which they might bring about some greater good. At the heart of the matter, the Sith Code upholds the individual above all else. Remember, think of it in terms of Sith ideals, Sith aspirations, Sith doctrine, not individual principles or interpretation, but Sith goals. The Sith Code, peace is a lie, there is only passion. Through passion I gain strength, through strength I gain power, through power I gain victory. Through victory my chains are broken, the Force shall set me free. The Sith Code upholds the individual above all else. It does not preach for the greater good. The dark side of the Force represents the quick and easy path, which offers great power without the need for an equal amount of discipline. A great amount of discipline to use it effectively, mind you. But you have access to power through access to strong emotions and reckless abandon. Theoretically, the dark side could be used by others to form ends such as the ones you describe, to attempt to bring about some greater good. Not always selflessly. Again, figures like Revan did attempt to do this. Figures like Anakin Skywalker, later Darth Vader of course, attempted to use the dark side to save somebody he loved, albeit somewhat out of selfishness and an inability to see her go. But again, it was an attempt nevertheless to save somebody through use of the dark side. So yes, it could be used for those kinds of ends. But would a Sith wish to? I would say no. The common Sith, the typical Sith, the proper Sith, the one who actually adheres to the Sith Code, to Sith doctrine, to Sith beliefs, the Dark Lord of the Sith, would not wish to use the dark side to bring about the greater good. I want to restate this most important point. This is the key. There is a distinction to be made between the dark side of the Force and all of the powers it offers in Sith philosophy. In truth, the dark side could be used in service to the greater good. However, in my view, this is very much pie in the sky. The individual's intentions become warped the further they immerse themselves in the dark side, the longer they spend immersed in the dark side. And so, whatever they meant to be at the start, whatever they were from the outset, it will be corrupted, it will be changed. It's not up to them, not purely. There will be a constant inner struggle. Beyond that, though, Unfortunately, no true Dark Lord of the Sith would wish to use their abilities in service of a greater good. And this is chiefly because of Sith philosophy. Sith doctrine supports self-determinism, promises a life free of restriction or obligation, and it condemns selflessness. Thank you for the thought-provoking question. I hope this was an answer that satisfies you, even if you don't quite agree with it. Thanks to anyone and everyone who's watched. I invite you all to share your thoughts in the comment section provided below. Have a good day. See you next time, guys.